riches this world had to offer me would never do. In a world full of bitter pain and bitter doubts, I was trying so hard to fit in, until I found out that I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I will carry a cross and a song where I don't belong. I don't belong. It was a beautiful letdown when you found me here. Yeah, for once in a rare blue moon, I see everything clear. I'll be a beautiful letdown. That's what I'll forever be. And though it may cost my soul, I'll sing for free. We're still chasing our tails and a rising sun. In our dark water planet, still spinning lights when no one wins and no one's won. See, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong. I will carry a cross and a song where I don't belong. I don't belong. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong. I'm gonna set sail for the kingdom come. Kingdom come, your kingdom come. Won't you let me down? Let my foolish ride forever let me down. Easy living, you're not much like the name. Easy dying, hey, you look just about the same. Would you please take me off your list? Easy living, please, come on, let me down. We are a beautiful letdown, painfully uncool. The church of the dropouts, the losers, the sinners, the failures, and the fools. Oh, what a beautiful letdown. Are we salt in the wound? Hey, let us sing 1, 2, down. Yeah, I don't belong here. No, I don't belong.
How's everybody doing? Good, good. It was quiet, wasn't it? Nice and just relaxing. Let's pray and ask the Lord's blessing and we'll get started. Amen. Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for the day. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity of gathering together, Lord, around your table, that we can partake of your word. Lord, that we can learn and grow in maturity, Father, into the people that you want us to be, Lord. We thank you for that. Give you all the praise and the glory in Jesus' name. Amen. I'd like to welcome those watching on Food for Life TV. Do appreciate you being with us. We're talking about language and creation. And I have been asking this question of myself and in my research and in the time as I'm in my quiet time when I'm talking to the Lord, when I'm just talking to Jesus about what things are about, who we are, what we are, how we are to exist. Because we have made it clear, I believe, that we see the Trinitarian doctrine and what has been created from that as something that is a miss within the context of what we call Christianity. And the thing that, when you say those things, when you talk about it, we can all say, oh yeah, we don't believe that, we don't. But then what do you believe? See, that's where it becomes, oh, I believe in Jesus. And we've all talked about this. Well, what does that mean? And it was interesting as Dad was ministering Sunday, these things come to my mind. And when we talk about faith, I would ask you, what do you think what's the enemy of faith? What'd you say? Doubt.
Unbelief.
Unbelief. Anybody else? What's the enemy of faith?
Lack of knowledge.
I knew you'd get it. Exactly. Doubt is an opposite. But you can have knowledge and doubt, can't you? What are you convinced of? See, because this is what's at issue at times. We hear from the Lord, and the next day, we don't believe we heard from Him. Huh? Isn't it the truth? We wake up the next morning and we go, and we're right back to the day. And just actually having to live by faith. See, because it's nice when the Lord talks to us. It really is. It's inspiring. It helps us. And I believe the Lord does that for that reason. But we can't forget what faith is about and understand the next day I have to hold to that same knowledge when I wake up the next day, when I come to that, and that's why it's important that we come back to the Lord and say, I believe that to be true, Lord. Talk to me some more. But see, that's where we fail a little bit too. We don't get up that next morning and really pursue or seek after those things. Because there are two things that have really struck me in what we've read over time. One thing that Jesus said, one thing that Paul wrote in his letter to the Hebrews. And it's in the great faith chapter, in the 6th verse. He says, you must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. I think Paul's reckoning to a little bit of what Jesus said when He was sitting on the side of the mountain that day, talking to all those folks. Seek first the kingdom of Jehovah and its righteousness, and everything else will be added to you. It makes you whole. You must believe that He is and that He is a rewarder. It makes you whole. It makes you complete. And we sometimes need a little extra shot, pep, a little pep talk. It helps, right? It does. I don't care. You need those things. And it's not even, I'm not trying to, and I shouldn't put it like that. But the Lord sees into ourselves what we sometimes are struggling with, and He's doing it as a matter of encouragement. But He knows the next day you still have to face those things. And this is where balance and understanding and all the things that Dad's taught throughout the years comes into play. And it's not just the one thing, but it's the whole that we have to hold to. And if we talk about how we're dealing with what we believe, what do we believe that He is? See, we say these things. We must believe that He is what? A spirit? An invisible God? I will ask you guys this question. What is a criminal? What's a criminal? Anybody? A lawbreaker? A lawbreaker? Right? A crime is what? We all know it. Just go ahead and throw it out there. Breaking the law. Right? Criminal in its etymology comes to us from French. It's sinful, wicked, mid-15th century. Of or pertaining to legally punishable offense. Of the nature of a crime, guilty of a crime. Criminal, despicable, wicked. From the 11th century and directly from the late Latin criminalis, pertaining to crime, from Latin crimen, we see the word crime. And we separate today criminal and civil law, don't we? See, civil, there's a whole sector of our society within the legal realm that's about civil law, not criminal. The word crime comes to us mid-13th century, sinfulness, infraction of the laws of God. Of Old French, crime, mortal sin. A charge, indictment, accusation, crime, fault, offense. To decide, to sift, to see. This is the word as it's come up to us. We say crime, and we understand somebody breaking the law. But see, within our society, we're not talking about against God's laws, are we? We're talking about just laws against society. What's criminal against society? Now, we talk about murder, thou shalt not murder. You have these things, Judeo-Christian ethics. But there will be people that would talk about social justice and social criminality outside of that context, and we shouldn't murder. Where do we get moral subjectivity and all the other arguments that push aside the context that we have a higher being to be accountable to? So all of these things have been in discussion for much longer than our country's been around. Okay? And before the United States of America, when you were living in, and it's still like this in other countries today, but living in the past in these countries, this was the thought process. If you were convicted of a crime, it was usually against the state, which was the church, which was against God. It was all one and the same. And it's still much like that in certain areas of the world. Not so much in modern Europe or the modern West today, even though we claim our Christian society. So, it goes back to what I've said about when we look at the Genesis narrative, and I brought this to bear a couple weeks ago, when the Father brought Adam to trial of a crime. See, in the context of that, an indictment, a charge. And I said the slaughtering of the animals was an indictment against him. He suspended the sentence. Adam did die. Eventually, he did die. He didn't stay living. He did not inherit the promise. Better? Okay. Here, turn it down a bit. So we don't pop everybody's eardrums. Okay. This is what we are dealing with when we look at these things in context. And if we're going to say, yeah, I hear it. to say that our foundation is built within creation, and that language is our context by which we understand truth, then this is where we must go to set our foundation. Throughout history, all these things have been part and parcel to what we understand today. But we don't think about much of these things today in our context, especially in the secular society that we live in today. And as much as we want to think the United States, and there are a great many people who have a faith in Jesus Christ, the society itself is very secular. The government is very secular. And it was curious. I was reading, I hear it. I'll get it in just a second, son. I was reading an article. I was reading some history about these things and looking back at how men in our time frame saw these things. And how many of you know who Thomas Paine is? All right? He was one of the architects of the early writings of the United States of America, a patriot, all that kind of thing. I was reading an article about these men, and his name came up, and this one guy called him an atheist. Called Thomas Paine an atheist. Along with Ethan Allen. You guys know who Ethan Allen is? It's not the furniture company. There was a real dude named Ethan Allen who was part of the American Revolutionary War. And he was a deist, just as Thomas Paine was a deist. These men were not Christians. They were deists. But this one gentleman lumps Thomas Paine into a group of atheists. And I thought it was kind of interesting. And, from his point of view, maybe he thought that's the way it was. Okay. But when you start looking back through history and seeing what was written, what was talked about, it gives you an understanding of how things actually came about. And you kind of have to sift through it. It's tough. It's not an easy thing to sift through history. Because we're sitting here talking, and you guys see me, you see we have the opportunity to really drill down into something. But if I wrote some of this stuff down and it sat in a vault for 1,000 years, somebody pulled it out, they don't have the luxury of sitting here listening to me talk about a paragraph that I wrote. And that's basically what we're dealing with, guys. You look at some of these stelas and some of this papyrus that came out of the ancient world, it's maybe a paragraph that they find in what we would consider writing. And we're trying to cull out of that as much information about their society and what they thought as possible. And so the more information, the easier it is, correct? That's why they keep digging. That's why they keep digging. So we're looking at this picture. And if I'm going to sit here and say that I do not agree with Trinitarian doctrine, then I have to give an account for that, shouldn't I? And bring to bear something that says, this is what I believe the person of Jesus to be. Because this argument wasn't solved in a moment. And I don't believe it was ever really solved in that respect. And I'll show you why I believe that. How many of you know Stanford University? All right? One of the leading educational institutions in our country. Yes, definitely Marxist, but still yet, it's Stanford. Yeah. And they have online a lot of their writings concerning their philosophical department. And one of their areas here is dealing with religious studies in philosophy and things like this. And they have a whole section on Trinity. And I've been reading it. It's a lot. I mean, it's somewhat boring at times, but it's interesting too. And this is a supplementary piece to the focus of Trinity. This is the history of Trinitarian doctrine. So it's just a sub-level of their main topic of Trinity. And they said this discusses the Trinity theories. Although early Christian theologians speculated in many ways on Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, no one clearly and fully asserted the doctrine of the Trinity as explained at the top of the main entry until around the end of the so-called Arian controversy. Nonetheless, proponents of such theories always claim them to be, in some sense, founded on or at least illustrated by biblical texts. Okay? So I'm not going to read everything here because it'd be a lot, but I'm going to give you some highlights of things that are in here, okay? I can give you the URL if you would like to go and read about this stuff yourself. The doctrine is as strongly influenced by or even illicitly poached from some non-Christian religions or philosophical tradition. This is an anti-Trinitarian viewpoint, which they have some thought processes. Divine threesomes abound in religious writings and art of ancient Europe, Egypt, the Near East, and Asia. These include various threesomes of male deities, of female deities, of father, mother, son groups, which we know of within Egyptian culture. You have Horus, Osiris, and Isis. I mean, that's one of the main ones. And and they think that come from Sumerian context from
Babylon, isn't it? Babylonian?
El, Asherah, and Baal. You see, Dad was reading not too long ago, you talk about Baal, right? Baal is the lesser god. Asherah was his mother and his mistress. And some say not necessarily his mistress, some say it goes back and forth. But see, what got lost in most of the thought process, and Baal became the main focus, was the main deity, El. The husband to Asherah. And through El and Asherah, Baal came into existence. This is as old as it gets. From Sumerian, long before, this is 2500 BC, even before that. And I think this is where you get a lot of the cultural context that came out of the thought process that Nimrod projected and came on down through this. Because these were the most earliest. And I find it interesting. We don't talk about this because in Christian, to say that they worshipped El, well, wait a minute, these were pagans. El is in the Bible. And this is where many scholars, archaeologists and whatnot, believe that the Israelite concept of religious worship came from the Sumerian because of the use of the word El. But see, I do believe that the ancient world knew who he was. I still believe that we know who He is. Is it still jiggly bad? Better? Good. You didn't spring me out there, no, son. Is that good? Okay. So there is so much in history that you can look at and point to, and how do we understand? And these are the arguments that come about within every scholastic, academic, scholarly. They argue these points. Well, so how do we believe that He is? You see what I mean? And this is where we have a struggle in these things, and I believe that as we've discussed, and why I asked the question, what's the enemy of faith? It's knowledge. Because they believed that He was. Nimrod said, we're not going to let you flood the earth anymore. Well, wait a minute, who are you talking to? If you don't even believe that He exists, right? What are we doing? That's not the case. Many cultures, there are plenty of cultures to this day that believe in deities. Hindus believe in these deities, friend. They're convinced of them. Muslims, they're convinced of it. You see, we're not the only ones. But how do we understand who He is? You must believe that He is. What does that mean? You see, because it goes to the point that Paul made, and I believe Paul's focus in this, as he disseminates the information at the beginning of that letter to the Romans. And he finally says, because they failed to retain God, Jehovah, the One, as knowledge. And I think it's more. It isn't just what we know. It's that we know who He is. That has been the problem. That was the first man's problem. He set about to change the dynamic. He was no longer a son. He totally pushed aside what he believed Jehovah to be. That's hard for us to really, I think, consider. Wow. Do we truly? I mean, we haven't seen Him. Adam stood there face to face. We have a hard time believing that He is. And we've created all these scenarios about who He is, even in Christianity. Who is He? What is He? Why? How does it work? What is it? Why? What? And yet, no one comes up with a solution. No one presents a logical, contextual, relatable thought process that says, I can know Him. I don't know how many times Jesus said, you don't know the Father, so you don't know me. One of the things that He says there when he said in the 14th chapter, John records, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except by me. If you know me, you would know the Father. And because you know me, you know the Father. And what did Philip say? Well, show us this way. After Jesus said all that is when Philip said that. And he says, Philip, have you been so long a time with me? In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. And why do we always consider mysterious and whatnot? And Jesus talks in very plain language to these men about these things. Knowing, knowledge. But see, we argue and fuss and fight over how we come to knowledge. Is it objective? Is it subjective? David Hume said knowledge only comes from within. So it's all subjective. There's others that say, no, we're products of the objective world and all of our knowledge comes that way. I disagree. See, I think that knowledge is knowledge and it all comes from the Father, whether it's experiential or objective. Because there is knowledge you gain objectively, and there is knowledge that you gain from your own experience, isn't there? But it only starts from one source. That's what we fail to recognize. We get going so fast on what we think we know, what we've come to know, what we've experienced, that we forget the object of that knowledge. And this is what man does. This is what Adam did. Now I'm telling you something right here. This is not in my notes. What I'm saying to you right now, it has nothing, I had never said what I just said before. I believe that's coming right from the Lord. When you look at the context of what happened there, he had knowledge, right? But see, where did that knowledge, the knowledge came from another source, and he started contemplating that, and it became subjective, and he forgot the source of his knowledge. Or he pushed it aside and said, no, I'm not going to pay attention. That is not the knowledge I choose to accept anymore. And that's what we do. We choose to refuse. I can accept what somebody says or not says. I guess that's the way you'd say that. If somebody is sitting talking to me about the stock market, I can choose to accept their knowledge or not, can I? It's a decision based on what? See, this is the problem. This is where all those things go. What is this person? Do I know him? What's his foundation? What's his credentials? We talk like that, don't we? Yet, when it comes to the creator of the universe, we don't want to believe that. We don't want to believe there's somebody that actually put this together. If it was a clear night, the clouds are out, so we have a hard time looking up past the clouds, don't we? But on a starry night, look up. Dad said Sunday, and you can't help it. It's just funny because somebody has thought, this comedian has thought about this like that. You look up and you say, I don't believe in nothing. Man, that's too vast. There's something out there. Well, we can't see him. You can't see a lot of things, my friends. There's a lot we can't see. Doesn't mean it isn't there. And it doesn't mean it's invisible. I'm tired of hearing about this invisible God. He's not invisible. Isn't that who isn't he the one that came down on the mountain? Yep. There's a lot to say about those things. But this is where knowledge must be understood and has a source, and it must be held in the right place. That doesn't mean we can't experience things and allow that knowledge to grow in us. Revelation comes, doesn't it? But we have to understand that we are beings that have been given the ability to reason, the ability to understand, the ability to know. What does an animal know? We talk about animals all the time living purely on instinct. What do they know? And why can't they know? Whose fault is that?
Because I believe God took it away from the animals.
See, there's so much we don't know right now. That's just conjecture on my part. You can take that for what it's worth. A direct influence, this is from from Stanford here, a direct influence on second century Christian theology is the Jewish philosopher and theologian Philo of Alexandria, aka Philo Judaeus. 20 BCE to 50 CE, the product of Alexandrian Middle Platonism with elements of Stoicism and Pythagoreanism. Inspired by the Timaeus of Plato, Philo read the Jewish Bible as teaching that God created the cosmos by his logos. The firstborn Son of God. Now, alternately, or via further emanation from this word, God creates by means of his creative power and his royal power, conceived of both as his powers and yet as agents distinct from him, giving him, as it were, metaphysical distance from the material world. What does that sound like? Another influence may have been the Neo-Pythagorean Middle Platonist Numenius, who posited a triad of gods, calling them alternately Father, Creator and Creature, Forefather, Offspring and Descendant, and Father, Maker and Made. Or on one ancient report, Grandfather, Father, and Son. Moderatus taught a similar triad somewhat earlier. Justin Martyr describes the origin of the Logos, the pre-human Jesus, from God using three metaphors: light from the sun, fire from fire, speaker, and his speech, each of which is found in either Philo or Numenius. Accepting the Philonic thesis that Plato and other Greek philosophers received their wisdom from Moses. This is what Philo taught. He holds that Plato, in his dialogue, Timaeus, discussed the Son, Logos, as Justin says, the power next to the first God. This is Justin the Martyr, Saint Justin. And in Plato's second letter, Justin finds a mention of a third, the Holy Spirit. This is, you can go and read in Justin's first apology, chapter 60, which I have read, and he says this. And he talks about these things. It's very plain. It's right there. It's in his own hand. As with Middle Platonists, Justin's triad is hierarchical or ordered, and Justin's scheme is not properly Trinitarian. The one God is not three, but rather one of them, and the primary one, the ultimate source of the second and third. See, but this is where you see what they talk about, the procession. What proceeds out from the Father. These are all parts of the doctrines that you can read today. Justin and later 2nd century Christians influenced by Platonism take over a concept of divine transcendence from Platonism, in the length of which no one with even the slightest intelligence would dare to assert that the Creator of all things left his super celestial realms to make himself visible in a little spot on the earth. Justin, Dialogue, chapter 60. That's what Justin said.
He never came down to himself. He would have been do that.
No. So how do we get these things? This man saying this is 2nd century. This is 100s. And much of our Trinitarian thought today is garnered from Justin. There's Theophilus, I think is another man, and Augustine. Of course, Augustine much later, after Nicaea. He's not considered an anti-Nicene. He was after the Nicene Creed and all that. So much of what we know today is definitely a thought process with Augustine, and they talk about those things. Now, there will be people, and they say it in here. If you read, they'll tell you that there are people, the Trinitarians, that say that no, the influence that you talk about, yeah, they talked about these things, but, you know, it's still true. How is Plato influenced by Moses? But yet this is what Justin says in his writing.
Wasn't he the one that said somebody was Christian before Christ?
Plato.
Okay.
Or no, he said Heraclitus.
Heraclitus.
And he said Plato went to heaven. He did say that. Just one more thing here, because this has to do with a little bit later or earlier. Another influence may have been the Neoplatonist Plotinus. He was very famous. He was, what Neoplatonism is they took Plato stuff, and Plotinus was huge about bringing, he did a lot of writing, taking Platonism, putting it into what I would say their modern look at it. Okay? But Plotinus triad, he says another influence may have been the Neoplatonist Plotinus triad of the one. Intellect and soul. The triad of the one, intellect, and soul. Okay? In which the latter two mysteriously emanate from the one. And are the one and not the one. Sounds strangely familiar?
Yeah, weird.
This is a Platonist talking. They are the one because they are from it. They are not the one because it endowed them with what they have while remaining by itself. Sounds strangely familiar? Plotinus even describes them as three hypostasis and describes their sameness using homoousia. Augustine tells us that he and other Christian intellectuals of his day believed that the Neoplatonists had some awareness of the person of the Trinity. This is stated in his Confessions, chapter 8:3. And he also references it in his work, The Polis City, chapter 10:23. I am spending as much time as I can looking at these things for the simple fact that I want to know what I believe and how I believe. and how I understand who my Father is. Because Jesus came to show us the Father. And I believe this very much. Right now, Jesus has veiled mankind from the Father. Or else I think there would be an end. Because we know at some point the Father is just going to remove Jesus from that place and take a look.
The veil will be gone again.
That's what's described in Revelation. And the angel will stand on the land and on the sea, and he will say, time is no more. What happens? So a lot of wrath. But what's the finality of mankind there? Anybody? What's the finality there? Right. Judgment. Exactly. So what does that entail? It says that we have to give an account, right? I think one of the most troubling things today in the Christian world is the fact that we are not accountable. Yet, I have to stand bare, naked. That's what it says, before the throne, and give an account. Why? If Jesus did it all for me, I shouldn't have to give an account. Right?
You should give it for him. I did it.
Does it matter how we live?
Yep.
Doesn't seem to be. Nobody seems to worry about how we live, how we conduct ourselves, how we conduct our lives, how we treat our fellow man, how we engage the world around us, how we conduct our lives. One of the things that I have spent a great deal of time, and I talk with my wife, my son, my daughter about on pretty much a daily basis, is how we integrate and conduct business. Because with Red Earth Productions, the one thing that I want to make sure folds into that, because I can't separate my existence. If I'm this person, then it has to be this person here. What are my core values? When we set up business, we talk about these things. How do we exist? What do we do? What do we talk about? How do we present things? Why do we do business with people? I've made it a function of thought that I don't do business for money. And I know that sounds strange, doesn't it? We're like, oh, bro, what do you mean? You work for free? No, I don't work for free. Nobody does. But it's not why I do it. Why should we enterprise ourselves toward our fellow man? Why? Isn't it just right to help people? To give? Dad said it Sunday, and I think the previous Sunday. Why do we give? See, this really struck me what Dad said. Why do we give? Is it expecting to receive again? It's not the way the Father gave. We give just simply because it's the right thing to do. And if we give, it makes a place for us. How do we understand that? In my business, if I give, it'll make a way for me. It'll make a place for me in the marketplace. If I do right, if my attitude is right. We focus more on the physical, the outward, the expression, rather than the attitude of how we do things. And I set myself in the day to function, to work towards how I conduct myself in my attitude. Because if I'm not doing that, then I know it can be easily gone the other way. And I don't want that. That's not the way I want to conduct my life anymore. See, because I look at the foundation of what happened in the garden, and the attitude changed.
Oh, yeah, sure did.
The attitude toward believing that He is changed. Then you look at the next step and you see Cain and Abel, right? Why were they bringing offerings? Why? See, there's nothing explicitly there that says that. And I don't think there's anything implied either. We just know that they did. I have a thought process to that. I have a belief toward that. I truly do. And I think it's based in the whole scope of things. And I'll share it with you because I think it has relevance to what we're talking about here. Why was Cain's offering rejected? It wasn't because it was simply grain, was it?
His attitude wasn't right.
His attitude wasn't right. It wasn't a matter that Abel brought an animal, although that's what we want to take and inject our Christian ideology into that. Because we believe you have to sacrifice. You have to spill blood. When the Father made covenant with Noah, was there blood spilled?
No.
What was the token of the covenant? A rainbow. It was a rainbow. He set in the clouds. Says it. Go read it. He didn't shed blood. Although they did talk about the animals shedding blood, but that wasn't the token of the covenant. The token of the covenant was the bow set there. And when he saw the bow, he would remember that he wouldn't flood the earth anymore. That's what it was. What was the altar for? Why did Abraham set up an altar when he got where he was going? See, I believe there are things that we have failed to recognize from the time that Adam was no longer a child of the household. See, he lost his what?
Sonship.
Right? Which took away his what? His rights. Took it all away. Mankind, us, sitting on this planet in just a hole in mankind's condition, has no right to the planet whatsoever. We don't believe that. The earth belongs to Jehovah and the fullness thereof. We're not even His family. We're squatters. Mankind's a squatter. I believe that very much. There's no right to the earth, no right to its blessing, no right to anything of it. He's not a son. And the proof is the fact that here these two men come with these offerings. Why? And the attitude of one was wrong and the attitude of the other was right. And it had nothing to do with the offering itself. It had to do with the fact of permission. I'll allow it for now, because I'm hoping to reconcile this bunch at some point. It's a matter of permission. I'll give you the right to do this. But see, when we see the arrogance of man, what does it stand up and say? We saw that with Cain. We saw it with Nebuchadnezzar.
Look what I did.
And we see in our culture today, in the United States of America, we are the greatest country in the history of the world. Look what my hands have made. That was Cain's problem. He didn't come asking for permission. And what does Jehovah do? Hey, don't drop your head, son. Don't drop your head, Cain. Don't you know if you just do right? See, because what is doing right is about attitude and how you believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Cain did not come there to seek after who he is. Abel did, understanding that he needed permission to even exist in that place. That's what we need. Somebody shows up at your front door, opens your door, walks in, sits down on the couch, gets in your fridge. You don't know them from... Tell me how you would handle that. You'd be calling the police. This guy just walked into my house and is eating my stuff and whatnot. I never gave him permission to come in here and do this. See, we don't think like this.
Well, you've lost even the tradition. If you think about it, when you go stay with someone or someone would welcome you to their home,
Yes.
you'd bring them a gift.
Yes.
Because you would recognize that they were allowing you into their home and access and everything else, and you'd bring them a gift as a understanding that they are giving you permission to be with them and a thank you.
See, and here's the other thing too. As a host, you look at the way you greet somebody. Wash their feet. This is what the ancient customs were. You welcomed into your home. Hey, my house is your house. If you have somebody there and you bring them in, hey, what's the saying? Make yourself at home. I go in the fridge. And even at that, you're at somebody you know, even your parents sometimes, or you go into your brother, your sister, whatever. You're in there, you're afraid even sometimes to open the fridge. You go, I know they said make myself at home, but it feels awkward, doesn't it?
Yep.
We do. We feel awkward about it. I try to get past that and just go in there and eat. I don't care. They said make myself at home, so might as well.
There you go.
And I want my family to feel that way in my house. Go in there. It's there. As Dad always said, Grandpa French always said, if you go away hungry, it's your own fault. And this is what the Lord is saying to us. If you go away hungry, this is what Jesus said. If you go away hungry, it's your own fault. Because I am the bread. And we don't know who He is. We've made Him into something that He never was intended to be. And He was just a son. But that son is something special. Special. But we need to have permission, guys. Because isn't that what Paul said? Because of Jesus and all these things, we have the right to be called sons of Jehovah. And it gives us the right to cry what? Father. Paul knew these things. He understood it. But what happens because of our doctrines that we've created in the church, it hides it. It's covered it up. It's made it mysterious. And we cannot see Jesus as he is. And therefore, we miss the truth. See, I believe that the Father's just.
Amen.
But see, we need to understand what his justice is. We all sit around and go, oh, well, you know, the Father, he's just. He's not going to... Yes, I understand. And he is forgiving. But you know what? There's going to come a day when we have to stand before the Father and measure up to who?
Jesus.
Or what? You don't get in.
Because he's the standard.
That's where he's just, is he's given us a son in which
That's
we understand.
true justice. And you will be weighed in a balance with Jesus on one side and you on the other. And if that don't balance,
You're like wanting.
depart from me, you worker of iniquity. You're unequal. I don't know you. See, it's serious business we're dealing with here. And we've created a fantasy about Jesus Christ. And it's tragic. I'm not here to judge people or but I understand the standard. And if I've got to give an account, then I must know how to give an account. And it starts today. It starts here in my own life, existing as Jesus existed in the earth. Therefore, when I do stand before the Father and I give an account for my life, it meets the standard by which I was given. And did you grow? No, man, I went and buried that talent in the ground. Because I knew it was going to be, you're so scary. You wicked servant. Take from him. I don't think we're not grasping the gravity of what's going on because we're caught up in the ethereal religious idolatry of Christianity. And we missed Jesus. And we better get back to it. This is a hard road, guys. Because that out there, what I just said, a few centuries ago, I'd be on a thicket of wood trying to blow out some oh yeah. This is what is considered heresy. I'll say it. I'm not afraid to say these things anymore. I just am not. I'm not worried about what people think of me in that situation. I'm just not. Because I'm not trying to say it to be this or that. This is just either true or it's not. And I don't believe in the Trinitarian context. Just in the short little space that I read you guys, what'd you hear? Go read it for yourself. It's not a mystery. These people were here. What was said, what was done. If you have eSword, okay, which most of us do, right? Go to your reference library in eSword. Go to the Ante-Nicene Fathers section, I believe it's number 3 or 4, where you can find Justin Martyr's writings and read it for yourself. Read what Justin had to say. Read his writings on his discourse or his dialogue with Trypho the Jew. And you will see all of these things. And this is what began to enter the early congregation of the saints. And I believe it is exactly why Jesus came to John on the Isle of Patmos and said, I want you to write a letter. I want you to write these things down and get them to the congregations in these 7 cities. Because it's important. Because these things are happening. See, why did Ephesus get away? What I mean is first love. See, these were the things that were becoming a problem. You must believe that He is. You have to understand the gift. What was the gift? The standard by which we were created to be. Jesus is not a God. He's not the second person of some God. He was the Son that the Father wanted from the beginning when He created Adam out of the dust of the earth. He simply came and created man in the womb of a woman. And he was born into the world. Created, not pre-existing. Why is that so hard to believe? Because we don't want to be accountable to it. It's that simple. We don't want to be accountable to it. Because then we have to actually live up to that standard. Are we willing to do that? Hey, listen, guys. These are things that are hard for me. Because I think about it every morning. I get up and I got to be better. I have to be better. I say those things. And I know that people go, well, Brian, you're just a sinner saved by grace. No, I'm not a sinner. And I have to be better. Because if I'm not, then what am I doing? Will people see Jesus in me if I'm not better? What's the difference? And I have to remember, and I'm talking about me, this is the things I think about, that one day I will have to be measured to Jesus before the Father. That's what I think about, guys. And this is why I'm talking about these things. Because I believe they're real. I believe it's true. And I believe that He is. I believe the Father is a being that has a physical presence, that has a mind, a character, nature. And He set a being in place in the earth that was His image and likeness. And He said, I'm going to give you, it's yours, subdue it. Subdue it as a son. This is what we have to do. Amen? Anything? Questions? Comments? Anything strike you?
Yeah, what you said about object
Yeah, okay.
and knowledge, it kind of made me think when the Father is the object of our knowledge, everything is true, comes from Him. And when the other council came and began to speak of a knowledge of subjective, basically.
You, yes.
You.
Yeah.
So knowledge has become subjective. Truth has become subjective.
Correct.
We really believe it's become subjective, when in truth, the object we look at is to the adversary of a voice they do not understand
Agreed.
or know.
Yeah.
And so therefore the Father's voice is drowned out by this
Yep.
other voice, which it was in the garden.
So many voices, yes.
And so the voices that come is from one knowledge.
Yeah.
That's a
Good and evil.
a good and even a dysfunction and a functionality that is not of the object where truth of life comes.
Correct.
Of existence, that how we should exist and become sonships again. It says the earth waits and travails for the manifestations of the sons of God again.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes, I believe, when we are transformed and truly become in our whole existence.
Whole being, yes.
Our whole
yes.
being transformed.
Where this corruption takes on
Takes
incorruption.
and
Yeah.
therefore the earth is come into the completeness again. It was from the beginning, and therefore we take our rightful place again before the Father, as we should have been in the beginning, as Adam should have done.
Absolutely.
But yet his truth became subjective, and his truth became a knowledge that was not of the object anymore, that he saw every day, that talked to him.
Yeah.
Life did not.
It's very, yeah.
Do you see what I?
That's very well
When you said
stated.
that,
I believe that.
It really
Absolutely.
hit- it
That's
hit
very good.
that. So even in the, I think some in the Christian world, not all of them, because I
No,
don't believe.
right.
I believe there are people out there. There's a remnant of people that truly believe, but I think mostly in the Christian, God is not even the object anymore. I don't believe His knowledge is the object.
Right.
If
No,
you
it's the
listen-
institution.
Build
It's
a
the
church.
institution, the ancient faith
Yes.
of a friend of, that we all know. I won't say his name, but now he's going to teach on the ancient faith and how it came about, and the altar and how the incense langs over the altar. And I'm like, is this the object of your knowledge and
Yes.
truth? See,
Right.
that's where
That's right.
where we look at a man that sits on a seat in Rome. That's the object of their knowledge and their truth.
Yes.
They listen to him. God has become
A false
obscure.
prophet.
A false prophet. God, basically, when you say God, he's become obscure because nobody really knows how to attach God to anything. Like you said,
And
he's
it doesn't mean
ethereal.
anything,
It
Penny.
doesn't mean anything. His name is Jehovah. His name is El. And he is Jehovah. He's Elohim. He is the creator of life and all things. And his knowledge that he was put into Adam so he could exist and live. Listen and live, Adam.
Yeah.
Listen and live. But we choose not to listen and live. We choose the knowledge that is subjective. That really, when you said that object and knowledge, it just started exploding in my mind. I was like, wow, I've never understood it like that before.
Exactly, and it was very good. And you see here, Pammy, what Des talked about when it comes to faith.
Mm-hmm.
We understand. See, doubt. We spend so much time. Oh, doubt. No, it's about the knowledge.
That knowledge.
Because faith
Right.
is
Because
there
it's
regardless of
different
what you'd like to think. We just doubt the fact that God exists.
See, and that's the thing. We
That's
doubt
the problem.
existence of an ethereal being that we don't even want to acknowledge. We do acknowledge him. Oh, I believe in God. Well,
Yeah.
define God.
What does that mean?
Yeah, define it.
That's what I'm saying. You must believe that He is. Well,
Yeah,
what does that mean?
What does that mean? And most people, most Christians, I'll guarantee you can't define it.
No.
I
They
agree.
can't define it.
I agree.
They will go into the doctrine, they'll go into the creeds, but define it for me.
Mhm.
You tell me what you believe Jehovah is.
And you understand why they set those creeds in place.
Oh yeah, because if they don't, then people have nothing to attach to.
And that keeps them from the
The
truth.
truth of the knowledge of life.
Yeah. Be-
So it just really, when you said that that wasn't in your notes, I'm like, Lord, that really opens up a lot of things right there. The object of my knowledge is Jehovah. And if that knowledge does not dwell within my being and I have no life in me.
And that means, and that is that culmination of what Jesus came to show us.
Yes.
I am the way,
I am
the
the
truth,
way.
and the life.
Yes.
And this is what we understand. Well, what's that truth? That truth is you were created in the image and likeness of the
Yes.
Father, just as I was.
I was.
And that is the truth of life.
Right.
And anybody who walks in that way has that life.
Has that life. Yes.
And I'm showing you this way. And this way, well, show us that way, Lord. Well, Philip, buddy, have I been this long and you don't understand the words coming out of my mouth? Come
He
on,
said,
baby.
Show us the Father.
And-
What do you mean, show me?
But you know what? We're the same way.
We
I
are.
mean, everybody, we beat up. Oh, Philip, yeah. Well, we've been there. All of us have a little dull, so we can't beat up Philip too much. But that was very well stated, Pammy. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, kid.
So the adversary did a very, if you think
Oh, he did a bang-up job.
He made everything, made truth, everything, knowledge subjective. Their own God. That's what he said. You can be your own God.
See, and here's what, and this goes to, see, doctrine and whatnot of Trinity and things like this, and we've kind of debunked that. Dad's talked about it recently. We've talked about these things where Paul talks about it. I believe it's in Colossians or Corinthians. Can't remember one. Anyway, but where he says that, and then Jesus will be made subject to the Father.
Actually, I think Timothy or Thessalonians. Yeah, one of those.
And the Father, so that the Father can be all in all.
Because when you come down to it, Jesus is a son.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is a son.
He's been placed in a position of authority because of transgression of man.
Yes.
And he sits in the authority and place of a king.
Yes.
Give us a king.
Okay.
There he is.
Got it.
And the reason I believe this is the case is because we forget to, they say, give us a king. But the caveat that was added of what they said, remember, so that we can be judged like all the other nations. Well, okay, but I'm going to bring you my son, and you will have to be judged by him. By that standard. See, the king. See, everything that man has done, the Father has given him. Here it is. You may not like it because you still want to do your own. But Jesus, this is why I said we have to give an account. We have to be measured to that standard.
Because he did it.
Because Israel asked for it.
Yep.
And Jesus fulfilled it like nobody had before.
No.
So, and it isn't subject to what we believe him to be. He is the object of our faith.
That's another falsehood. He's not subject to our thoughts of who he is, or who Nicaea says he is.
Nope.
It's subject to who God says he is.
Amen.
Amen.
Jehovah said who he was, and that's who.
And Jehovah stepped out of the clouds a couple times and said, "This is my son."
Yeah.
Well pleased.
Listen to him. You better pay attention.
And we haven't. That's what's
No, we
tragic.
have not paid attention. No.
So, is it a long road this way? Yes. But these are the things I'm going to focus on. I've got so much stuff in here. It's, next week we'll talk. I said, mankind has no idea how to finish the statement, I am. We don't know how to finish that statement. We just don't. And the reason we know that is because we got all them people walking around going, who am I? We don't know how to finish the statement. It's tragic, guys.
It is.
And it's because we've left ourselves in this place because we don't want to be accountable to our Maker. Amen. Anything else? Good? Thank you for joining us on Food for Life TV. Hope it was a blessing to you. Comments, questions? Would love to hear from you. And please send them our way. Everybody have a great night. Enjoy. And we'll see you again on Sunday.
I hear you breathing in, another day begins. The stars are falling out, my dreams are fading now, fading out. I've been keeping my eyes wide keeping my eyes wide open. Oh, your love is a symphony all around me, running through me. Oh, your love is a melody underneath me, running to me. Oh, your love is a song. The dawn is fire bright against the city light. The clouds are glowing now, the moon is blacking out, it's blacking out. So I've been keeping my mind wide open. I've been keeping my mind wide open, yeah. Oh, your love is a symphony all around me, running to me. Oh, your love is a melody underneath me, running to me. Oh, your love is a song. Your love is a song. Oh, your love is a song. Your love is strong. With my eyes wide open, I've got my eyes wide open. I've been keeping my hopes